Hello again. Okay, this is the third try. Welcome back. Happy belated Halloween. It's November 1st, and as you can tell in the background, it's very scary in this studio space that we have here. I'm assuming you can name the movie that this is a part of. Yeah. Pea soup climbing on the ceiling.
The worst bit was like, help me, when it came on her tummy and it just went, help me. I remember that gave me nightmares forever.
Exorcist, one of the scariest movies ever made. But welcome everybody, Ice Age Wine Wednesday.
Who did that?
I don't know. It might have been
Was it someone spooky? We do not own the rights.
Just as a reminder, like when I watched the movie, what was it called? Scary Movie. I think it was the spoof on all those really scary movies, and I think it was the second one. And oh God, I can't remember the actor, but he was playing the role of the priest in the scene for The Exorcist, and he walks in and he sees the girl like doing all her crazy stuff, and the priest just goes, "Fuck that," and leaves.
Beep that.
Yeah, I apologize for the language. Anyway, as you can tell, we don't have any logos on our screen this time.
Because they weren't played today.
For whatever reason, the little service that we were using to help us put some nice little pictures on there, it was just not working very well, and it was giving us a blank black screen. So we're just going to do it.
It was very Halloween. I mean, the thing is, it's kind of like the podcast before it's even a podcast.
It was like a
because this is actually turned into a podcast as well.
Yeah.
On our wine, on our trips and tricks and tips and trips and.
It was.
It
was a trick only, no treat, but hopefully the rest of this is a treat. We do want to shout out to our wonderful sponsors. This is a Writer's Block Malbec by Steel Wines.
We love Steel Wines. They're
the best.
Good
old Bill Shakespeare on the cover. Wine was born of angel tears, the laughter of old friends, and the lingering rays of an autumn sunset. I won't read the whole thing.
Swit swoo.
It's a lot back there.
Actually, I read, because there was all the fires in Napa Valley and the surrounding areas. I read someone today, someone who's my friend on Facebook, her sister is a wine person from Napa Valley, and she said not everyone's been affected, and they actually could really do with some visitors. They could really do with some people coming.
Yeah, the tourism has been affected. Quite a few of the wineries have literally been affected, but not all of them.
Not all of them, but the ones that are still going would really value your business, and that'd be a way to help during this time.
So order wine.
Order wine and go and see them, especially order wine. Cheers.
From Steel Wines. Yes, cheers.
Cheers. They were amazing. They made sure, that's delicious. They made sure that we still got wine when we were in New Orleans, because we had a party for the screenwriters and the winners of the Table Read My Screenplay in New Orleans.
I didn't know.
And they supplied the wine for the party. And oh my goodness, we were told that we would be lucky if we had between 15 and 20 people showed up. We had 70 people.
I didn't know that either. How did I not know that?
Yeah, and they showed up for the party, and they all were like drinking the wine. There was this one guy, he came back and he went, I need another glass for my mum. I was like, this isn't a mum crowd.
Yeah.
This is a filmmaker's crowd. He literally just wanted another glass.
If you want another glass, just ask us for another glass.
Yeah. But that's how much he was enjoying the Steel Wines, is what I'm saying. It was very well.
Big thank you to Steel Wines. Yeah.
Really, really well.
Well, thank you to everybody who has chimed in so far. Felicity evidently has something in the
I have some pork in mine.
Yeah, it might have been my fault. But happy November 1st, technically All Saints Day for anybody who celebrates that. But yesterday was Halloween. We didn't really do much. We kind of hid from the people that were trying to come to the door.
I'm terrified of children dressed as goblins.
So Halloween worked. But
we left 2 massive bowls of candy out there and came back to a few lollipops.
Yeah. It was kind of like we were leaving food out for stray cats.
I wouldn't do that. I would be inviting the cats in.
Yeah. But anyway, so we're here today, and we're obviously going to be talking about the horror and thriller genres, the scripts. We can talk about some of our favorite scary movies. I would love to hear everybody who's on right now to tell us what their favorite scary movie is.
Yes, please do.
Feel free to chime in. We can talk about those. If you have any questions at all about anything, like as always, this is kind of an open Q&A. Specifically today, obviously, we're going to be talking about the subject of the horror and the thriller, and a little bit of the difference between the two, because there is a very specific difference. There's a huge fan.
One's called horror, one's called thriller.
There's a huge fan cult following for horror movies in general. It's one reason why they do so well. And those people will probably even be able to go into it much further than we could, just because they're such big fans. But
I think there's also, there's this idea, isn't there? There's this, It's because with the Blair Witch Project, and that was such a big change and a big money-making enterprise.
Yeah.
From something that was just some people who kind of messed around in the woods, and then suddenly they made a fortune. So I think there's this idea about horror movies that you can shoot them for very little and actually make a fortune. Although we did look at 2005, the remake of The Ring, it cost them 48 and they made 200 and
it was 230 some odd $million, I think.
Yeah, 249 million worldwide, and it cost them 48 to make.
So that was the production budget. So obviously, for everybody who may not, realize a production budget is usually doubled, sometimes tripled with marketing
and stuff. Yeah.
The total all-in cost for a movie, if it's a $50 million production budget, could be upwards to 150 million. It totally depends on the movie. But they still made 100 and some odd million dollars off of that.
We hope that Naomi was on the back end.
These days, this was made in 2002, The Ring.
That remake.
2002.
Oh, 2.
Yeah. These days, no one really would put in $50 million for a straight horror movie. And we'll talk about that. This is more of a supernatural thriller than straight horror.
Mm-hmm.
I shouldn't say no one. Hollywood's
it's
getting a little better. Much harder to put that much money. They would probably try to make it for 10 to 15, and they probably could.
I wonder what the budget was for The Witch.
The Witch. If anybody's seen The Witch, chime in and let me know if you're still alive. Because that movie scared the hell out of me. It was just a very unfeel-good movie of the year if you've seen The Witch. This came out maybe, 2015.
Okay, it cost them $4
million.
They grossing 40 million.
40 million. And that had very little marketing behind it. Like, there wasn't a huge push. I don't think that many people really heard about it, but anyway, we could talk about all these horror movies, but The Exorcist is the only movie that has ever truly scared me, which it makes it my favorite by default. Yeah. Kim Britt. Thanks, Kim.
Me too. I actually stayed awake saying, I was raised a Roman Catholic. I stayed awake saying Hail Marys all night.
It's, the whole idea, and Scott Marcus is an employee with the ISA. He does a lot of our production work and editing, and he interviews people on red carpets. He went with you to Tribeca.
Yeah, that's very good.
But Scott has kind of a second life of a ghost investigator, researcher, whatever you want to call those people.
Paranormal.
Yeah, paranormal expert. He's not a ghost hunter necessarily, even though I have gone on little expeditions with Scott.
I don't think he goes to go and suck them into a vacuum cleaner.
Right, vacuum cleaner. Yeah, but he knows a lot about the supernatural and paranormal worlds. So it's a lot of fun talking about that. And I grew up in a haunted house, and so Scott and I naturally just have a lot of stories to tell. But there are very specific.
Oh yeah, he really did grow up in a haunted house.
Yeah, no, that wasn't. That was
You kind of like glossed over that, but I mean, I've heard the stories, and it sounds terrifying. I kind of do this whole I don't believe in ghosts thing because I just basically that's my way of saying to the universe, keep them away from me.
Yeah.
But you actually having that true ghost thing.
And and that kind of goes into a little bit of I wasn't planning on talking about it, but it's like the different types of hauntings. And we lived in that house for 24 years, and we were never scared enough to feel the need to leave. It was more of what is called in the supernatural community a residual type of haunting. There were some conscious hauntings in there that were a little weird, but and that did kind of scare us after a while. Anyway, we don't need to talk about the different types of hauntings. If anybody has any ghost stories that you can keep in like a short little comment,
please do tell us ghost
feel
stories.
free to share that. We're a day after Halloween, so maybe you've kind of, you've shook off the little scary stuff going on. But
we have a few things we should probably.
We do have, like usual, some things that we want to promote.
Let's do some housekeeping.
We'll just kind of put this here so we can both go through it. Table Read Park City is open for application.
Yes, for shorts and for features and for web series and for TV pilots, and they're doing free feedback.
I do not have that listed. Free feedback. You can go to tablereadmyscreenplay.com if you have a script.
The first 20 pages. First 20 pages, free feedback till the 1st of November. Oh, so that's today.
Until tonight. So, you have like 3 hours.
So first 20 pages free feedback, so that's kind of a good thing. And they're doing that for shorts as well as features and TV pilots and stuff. But it's open. It's going on for a little while yet.
Rob Ripley, I think, just joined us, and he was one of the grand prize winners.
He was for New Orleans, although he didn't come and play. He was busy in Hawaii.
He's too busy watching the Dodgers win or lose Game 7 of the World Series. That may be one reason why I don't know. We've got a decent amount of people watching tonight. So I don't really care about the Dodgers.
You're a Cubs fan.
For
that's
the
why.
Los Angeles residents who are lifetime fans, I hope the Dodgers win for you.
It's been exciting though.
It has been a crazy World Series.
AstroTurf versus the dodgy dealers.
Yeah. I am secretly pulling for Jose Altuve and the Astros, but well, now that this is recorded, everybody knows it. Anyway, tablereadmyscreenplay.com. The Park City application period is open for virtually any kind of script that you have. You can go there and find out. And then, of course, we have our upcoming Fast Track Week.
I know that's soon. They're arriving on Monday the 13th.
Monday the 13th, 2 weeks.
Friday the 17th. And actually on that Thursday, the 16th of November, is our third Thursday at Busby's East. And we are having a panel run by Nickelodeon. So Karen Kirkland, the VP of Education, and
run and moderated by Nickelodeon.
Yeah. So do come along to that, completely free, and you can also meet our Fast Track Fellows. Who one is coming in from Philadelphia, and one is an LA resident.
Yeah. If you don't know what our Third Thursdays events are, there are monthly social events. It's just a way to get everybody together. We usually give away some prizes. And
it's Chicago, right. Toronto, Montreal, London. I'm forgetting somewhere. LA,
New York, and I think you hit them all. Montreal, Toronto. Anyway, if you want to start your own Third Thursdays, you can email us at support@networkisa.org.
And we will support you in that.
Yeah,
I did there.
So of course, we've got Fast Track Week coming up, which means we're flying two of the two fellows out to Los Angeles. And swinging them around town to a whole bunch of different meetings.
I'm not doing any swinging. Are you planning on doing swinging?
We're just going to put them into like a cannon and launch them at their meeting
swinging
locations.
For me is having sex with multiple partners.
There was a movie with Jon Favreau and Vince Vaughn called Swingers, which really had nothing to do with multiple partner sex.
Yes, they just like being on swings.
Anyway, we have that coming up, but then our new Fast Track 8, I think, is opening up soon. You can go to networkisa.org/fast track to find out more about that. Basically, what it is our fellowship. So we select two fellows.
Exactly as we just said, not swinging or sending them out in a cannon. We actually just send them around town.
We get them meetings with major executives, management companies, producers around town. It's kind of
Shoot Your Sizzle is open.
Shoot Your Sizzle.
And that is amazing. That wasn't for Shoot Your Sizzle. Shoot Your Sizzle is open, and we're planning on doing the filming 14th to the 18th of December for the winners from last year. We've been working on their script. It's a really brilliant feature. We're locking down the last bits of production. Very exciting. So, but Shoot Your Sizzle is open for next year. So
Shoot Your Sizzle. Beautiful.
Shoot Your Sizzle.
So basically, you can submit pretty much any kind of script, and then they'll make a sizzle out of it.
Yes. Well, then we actually get the writer to.
You can submit shorts, but you don't have to.
No.
Right. LA Third Thursdays. Let's see. Oh, and we never really remind you guys of this, but we have a new section on the website for one thing called Pro Tips and Tricks. They're really short videos of all of the interviews that we've done. Yeah,
some of them. I mean, there's some going back years that we've just like finally put up.
All the interviews we've done on the red carpet and at Sundance, and they're just great little nuggets that you can watch. You know, you take 10 minutes, you watch 3 of them.
You can probably search actually for someone you like, or if you are thinking comedy tips or writer's block or something like that, you can probably search.
Yeah. So go to Pro Tips and Tricks. There you go. James just put up the link for us. It's a new
free content.
It's all free. I think sometime in the future it's going to be paid only, but right now just take advantage of it. And if you are on the site and you have a profile on our site, you should go and check it out. Update your profile as much as you can. Upload scripts to it. You can
your posters.
You can make your scripts private. You do not have to allow people to see them. The reason why it's helpful is because if you apply for a contest through the ISA site, it's just going to pull from your profile, and you can just select the script to then submit to that contest. So it makes it a lot easier, and it's a way to just kind of keep all of your stuff organized, one place to go. Anyway, networkisa.org. And then lastly, we're announcing our top 25.
Top 25 writers to watch in 2018, and Rob Ripley is one of them.
Rob is one of them. We have obviously 25 writers on there. No need to, single any out. Otherwise, we'd have to name everybody. But
exactly. I'm only mentioning him because he was here.
Rob's on board. But the way you can make it onto the top 25, basically hit some big successes. And, all of these writers that made it on the top 25 are people and writers that Felicity and I have cultivated over the past couple of years. This is our first annual one. We're going to release this list every year. But you have to let us know what's going on. Otherwise, we're not going to find out, One of the reasons these top 25 writers are on that list is because we've been in touch with them for the past couple of years. We know the successes they've had. We've had an Academy Award winner, a Cannes Film Festival premiere with directed by Robin Wright, a whole bunch of grand prize
Rob
contest
keeps selling
winners.
his scripts.
Yeah, if you sell your scripts, you get optioned, you get repped by a major production company or management company or agency, major stuff. Like one of our writers has a huge option with a potential for $40 to $60 million budget that's coming up. But that's true. So anyway, nonetheless, we have a lot of writers who are doing very well. But if we don't hear from you, then we don't know how.
And I think the other thing is we wanted to say that it's an ISA list. It's us saying to the people that support and are part of the ISA, the people that have come with us, who have, shown us love the same way we show them love. So we are biased for the people that support the ISA.
Yeah, and all those people, we're pushing out around town in terms of all the contacts we have. We're saying, hey, you should read this writer. You should meet with this writer. I would say maybe half of them are local to LA. Not all of them
half and half,
here. Yeah,
there has been a lot of fast track fellows who have then been selected.
I mean, we've talked about it a number of times on these Wine Wednesdays, how to find success and how to make a living out as a writer, et cetera. It always goes down to constantly being in the mode of educating yourself and working and being a part of writing groups and networking and socializing, and you have to constantly stay in the energy of the world, and you don't always have to be in Los Angeles to do that. It's just a lot of the writers I have.
That's why we're doing Third Thursdays in other places.
Exactly.
Build communities.
To build the community, and you can build your own community.
Did I get wine and cork today? I got a special. It's like I've got a meal, cork meal. Excuse me, picking up bits of cork.
Well, I suppose it's necessary.
It's like a horror story.
The horror.
The horror.
In my wine.
There's cork in my wine.
But no, in terms of the success stories, a lot of my writers through the Story Farm. If you want to find out about the Story Farm, you can go to thecraftcourse.com. But a lot of my writers through the Story Farm are not local to LA, but I'm working with them with a phone call literally every week, giving them notes.
Interwebs.
And over the web, and I'm giving them notes, and I'm on the phone with them every week. But they are finding success just naturally, and sometimes without my help in terms of getting their stuff out there, because they're just in that mode and they're
I think the thing is you're in the mindset, aren't you? You're in the mindset of getting stuff done.
Yeah, but their material is improving. That really is what it comes down to. How good is the script? How good is your writing?
And that is the thing that we should be concentrating on. How good does the horror script have to be in order to make you scared? The Exorcist, very, very scary. So
if you look at a lot of the huge successes for all these horror and thriller movies, like the really big ones, the Get Out, It is arguable, but it was just a very nice balloon, I thought. But I think the marketing for it was just that's really what kind of did that. Phenomenal. But Exorcist, The Ring, even God, there are so many others that we could name. But the ones that are hugely successful, they're usually some kind. It's like a slight little paradigm shift. The Blair Witch Project is a perfect example. It's something that we haven't quite seen before, but it's still very recognizable. We know what it is when we sit down. We know we're going to be scared. There's something about the true stories. I mean, the fact is that if you explained what happened in your house to anybody about, hearing the footsteps or the person at the end of the bed, all that other kind of stuff, it's scary, but it's not terrifying. But then when you realize it's absolutely a true story because it's someone that tells you that's what happened, it changes it. Yeah, it adds a definite layer of. And there have been a lot of those over the past 10, 15 years, like Haunting in Connecticut, and then the Annabelle. What's the Changeling thing? The Changeling was this movie in the early 80s with George C. Scott. If anybody who was watching has seen that, it's not the Angelina Jolie movie that came out like 6-7 years ago. It's with the lipstick. Yeah. Yeah. I've lost my child. And she lost one of her children. Yeah. But no, The Changeling in the 80s, it was really, it's just the epitome of a ghost haunting, I have to figure out why my house is haunted kind of story. The Poltergeist
movies were excellent.
Poltergeist. So that's another example of something. People had heard of poltergeist hauntings. They hadn't really seen a movie just about a poltergeist. But then what is so scary about the poltergeist? The little girl looking in the freaking TV.
And also her being unafraid by it, but all this other stuff kind of happening around, but it just being this kid. So you have this innocence.
Yeah. All of the really fantastic, scary movies, you can talk about the concept of it being scary and why, like the haunting or whatever the story is behind the ghost or whatever, and then a few moments that are freaky. The Ring had so many, you know, when they opened the closet to reveal the teenager that had died and her face was like all, it's so scary. But the reason we remember these movies is because we remember the little girl. We remember Naomi Watts' character. We remember Nicole Kidman and the others and how amazing she was and how connected we are, you know, in terms of the character. And it's always going back to the character. There was something else there was a segue. Oh, what makes it so good?
Yeah, what makes a horror movie so good?
So if you look at a movie like Saw, that's another example of a type of horror that we hadn't seen before.
I haven't seen it.
Really, really, it's so gruesome that people had to see it.
I think that's the thing. It's like so gruesome that it's
for people who don't like horror. Yeah, you don't want to watch. But that's the difference between horror and thriller. Horror is gore. It's the
slashes.
It's the scares, like it's the, you know, in your face. Michael from Halloween with this mask on, chasing people.
It's always the head, isn't it? They've left the car, and they've left the girl inside the car because women, of course, are useless in any kind of scary situation. Same as running away; they're always falling over, and then they always get left behind in the cars. I think it might change after this period of history, but anyway, this is the old genre. And this kind of like the head comes, there's always a moment where you're like, she's going, I wonder where my boyfriend is. And something like smash, his head is like in front of her.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And you always go,
so it's scare plus gore. Thriller is more about the chase and the mystery, the investigation, and the resolution
psychological
of a cool set of clues that are trying to figure it out. So that's why with The Ring, and it was kind of this this creation of these subgenres through the 90s and into the 2000s of the subgenre of supernatural horror, supernatural thriller. And The Ring could probably be called a supernatural thriller.
Yes.
Because why?
Well, because it had other things, other layers to it, in the fact that it was an investigation. It was based on something true. It wasn't just there was a girl in the well.
There was a very specific set of intention to solve the riddle,
the crime, yeah,
as opposed to a Halloween or a Slumber Party Massacre where it's just about seeing people get slashed up, you know. Yeah. And then there's like maybe a little bit of why was he like that and whatever. Like that's not really what you're worried about. The reason you're watching it is because you want to see the main character get chased down by Freddy Krueger, you know,
or not.
And the crazy.
With his really long arms. Do you remember the really scene where he had massive?
I remember, for whatever reason, my parents or my sisters allowed me to watch one of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies when I was like 9, and I'll never forget when that guy was sucked into the bed.
Wasn't it Johnny Depp?
It might have been Johnny.
It's a young Johnny Depp.
It was one of his first movies, but when that guy gets sucked into bed and then he's like thrown around the whole room.
I was going to say, it's worse when the woman is thrown around the room.
Oh, that was
kind
the combination.
She's got the bloody kind of like hand.
Ruined me. Yeah, but those are the moments why we watch those horror movies, you know. For thrillers, we're watching it because we want to find out why Nicole Kidman's old mansion is haunted. You know, that's a supernatural thriller. That's not a horror. That's like a ghost-oriented riddle that needs to be solved. And then the twist in the others is just
it's amazing,
unbelievable. It's just brilliant. Sixth Sense, that's a supernatural, probably horror because of the amount of gore and scary, you know, blood that's involved with all the ghosts and the, you know, it could be argued.
I was going to say I remember the twist of it, but I don't remember I remember watching it. So it couldn't have been that horrific because I don't watch horror.
Yeah, you know what? You're right. I think it is a supernatural thriller. One thing that I was reading through, you know, all the little research here just to kind of get my brain together is that the primary difference in terms of the characters between horror and thriller is that a horror character is willingly going after whatever this issue is, and they're finding their way like into the monster's lair, almost in a intentional way. The thriller main character is either, what's the word? I don't want to have to look at my notes. Oh God, sorry guys. What am I saying? I can't think of the darn word that I'm trying to say. They don't want, reluctantly going toward this investigation.
Reluctant hero.
Yeah, they're being pulled in against their will, so to speak. And that's a pretty big difference, and it changes the whole dynamic of the movie and the story, because the character is being forced to try to figure out, like Naomi Watts in The Ring. She's pulled in because her sister's daughter was one of the teenagers that was killed. So she is asked by her sister to try to figure out what happened. And as the story goes, it is a little bit more willful. Like, yes, I want to try to figure out the story, but she doesn't really want to do it, It's just what she does. She's an investigative journalist,
Well, that gives her a link with her ex-boyfriend as well. That is a great distinction between horror and thriller. Thank you, Rob. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
Hi, Mr. Max. Drink enough and you'll feel possessed.
That is
Thanks,
definitely
Michael.
true.
Definitely
Yeah.
true.
Anyway, you guys can ask questions, share what your favorite scary movies are. You can, chime in at any time.
So I remember The Shining. The Shining is interesting because of the it's so epic, and there's so many elements of it that are interesting from a writing point of view, and then from an acting point of view. Because there's the whole thing about Stanley Kubrick, who kept the female, I can't remember the actress's name, but kept her on tenterhooks the whole time, so made her feel like she was going mad. Never let her feel that her performance was good enough. Whilst Jack Nicholson was taking loads of coke and allegedly, and I'm
sure it was,
and being kind of like getting all the praise. So kind of actually creating that dynamic that they have at the end, actually in their relationship while they were filming it. And then
the scene when he's walking up the steps and she's like so exhausted and trying to swing the bat, and he's just like flicking his hands, and the line that he has is I can't remember her name. Well, no, he's God, I can't remember the wife's character's name, but he says like "love of my life," like he doesn't mean it. Oh God, it's just Jack Nicholson in The Shining, but I would call that a supernatural horror.
Right.
Because there is less of a mystery to solve. You're not focused on the mystery, you're focused on him being basically possessed by
then also because there's that thing at the end with the image, the picture.
And he becomes part of the hotel. Yeah.
When he's in that, which is kind of amazing. House of the Devil, I don't know, Michael. Angel Heart, Mike Rogers.
Oh, Angel Heart.
I loved it. Do you remember the scene where Mickey
Rourke.
Rourke is he's peeling it's Robert De Niro's peeling the egg. He's the devil.
Vaguely, yeah.
He's the devil, and Mickey Rourke is he's kind of watching him roll this egg as the shell is cracking on it. And I just remember, because at the time it was like I was at drama school, or kind of anyway around that time, and there was a whole thing about who could be the stillest on the camera, because Robert De Niro was always very still, and then Mickey Rourke was like they were kind of trying to out-still each other.
Interesting.
They were like, remain really, don't wobble your head around.
Interesting.
Get Out.
Yeah, I'll admit I have not seen Get Out, and sadly I know the twist, but I need to see Get Out. I've just heard so many good things. Devil's Backbone I have not seen, Rob. I apologize.
Has he got a really big backbone? Is it a protruding?
He's a tough guy, that devil.
Oh, look at my backbone. I'm really.
My favorite movie, let's see, my favorite scary movie is The Changeling. I think it's 1980, 81. George C. Scott, brilliant, and because it's so subtle. But then, so the story goes is that George C. Scott, his family dies in a car accident. He's left behind. He moves to the Northwest. He's a composer, and he teaches like music theory at a university or whatever. He rents this old, huge, unbelievable mansion, and he starts having weird experiences in it. And he discovers what these experiences are and why this little boy is haunting the house. And it's a little bit of like somewhat of a political conspiracy, blah, blah, blah. And it's not so much about the story, but how he discovers these things. And it's some of the first times in movies that we saw these scary ghost tropes. Like
You said tropes at the same time.
We did. Exorcist theme. But it's the first time that we saw a seance being recorded, and then the playback of the seance, and then he turns the volume up and he can hear the kid talking. There's a ball that keeps bouncing down the steps. And then when it happens like the third time, and he gets frustrated and he takes the ball, drives across town and throws it in the river, and he comes back home and the ball comes bouncing down the steps, but the ball's wet. And it's just brilliant and so much fun because there are no special effects.
So is that like, because American Horror Story is set in a house where these spirits have been left behind.
It depends on which season, though.
I guess. I mean, it's just because the thing is, I only saw the first season. So I guess that feels like that's the residual energy in the house, like where you grew up, across from the graveyard and the clown place. You literally cross from a graveyard and a clown.
So my hometown, I'll just tell a little, how about that? We'll have a little ghost story session.
Please do tell us yours.
The hometown I grew up in was called Delavan, Wisconsin. Some of you, I saw my longtime childhood friend Mark Becker just chime in. I don't know if he's watching, but Mark knows about all these stories. But
and thank you so much for the top from BizTank.
A huge thanks to BizTank. We hosted a Wine Wednesday for the kids out there in Delavan, the high school students, and they sent a whole bunch of wine, although they didn't send that one.
No.
And some clothes and swag. Anyway, thanks to Mark.
Thanks to them. I'm just saying, but this is supported by Steel Wines.
Our sponsor tonight, however, is Steel Wines.
Yes. I'm just topping you up while you tell your ghost story.
That's fine. So I grew up in a town called Delavan, Wisconsin, about 6,000 people, very almost Rockwell-esque in terms of nothing ever happened, and it was very quiet. I could ride my bike out, across town at midnight.
And you went up into the sky.
That was very safe. Wait a minute. That's a whole other genre.
Hang on.
But grew up in an old house, one of the first houses that was built in the town. The town was built in like 1860 or whatever. And the town was known as the circus capital of the country in the early 1900s. Because Barnum and Bailey and the Ringling Brothers, I think at the time it was just Barnum and then the Bailey Brothers and then the Ringling Brothers would come from Milwaukee, Madison, and Chicago, and my town was kind of right in the middle of it. So as those troops would come through, they would all stop in my town and like literally make the town about 2 times bigger. And all the houses down the main strip kind of went down a hill are still there, and they're all old and dilapidated and out, but they were all circus people houses.
I love it.
All the circus people there. There are elephant bones in the lake behind my house because when the elephants died, they would just shove them in.
That's so terrible.
The Clown Hall of Fame was across the street from my house when I was a kid. Literally, the National Clown Hall of Fame.
People are very scared of clowns, so that would be scary on its own.
And then on the other side of the street was the original graveyard to the hometown, with about like 45, 50 headstones. Most of them were broken off. Just a really
so a nice kind of run-down
Midwestern town,
run-down graveyard.
Something you see out of the Legend of Sleepy Hollow kind of thing. But anyway, our house was commercially zoned from the get-go. From the moment it was built, it always had a commercial zoning on it, and so businesses were always run out of our house. From the outset, it was. I wouldn't be surprised, but from the outset, there was a restaurant in the back. It was a boarding house for many, many years, and which means hundreds of people came and went through that place. It was a funeral home. And then it was a beauty salon for about 15 years before we moved in. And I remember when I was real little when we moved in, I remember old ladies would come to the door during that first couple of weeks we moved in, and they're like, "I'm here for my haircut." Anyway, my mom ran a business out of the house, and long story short, the hauntings were very residual in terms of every night you would hear the same thing happen upstairs in the house, as if somebody had like a bag of marbles and they dropped it on the wood floor and they would spread out, and then we would always hear footsteps walking around upstairs. If you woke up at the same time of night between 2:30 and 4 o'clock, you'd always hear it. But the big story, I'm totally taking all the time here, but
I love a ghost story.
Feel free to chime in. But Max, have you seen Fellini's Clowns? I have not. I don't know if I want to see Fellini's Clowns. But anyway, the primary story goes as this. So when my sister Caroline was really little, she was probably 11 or 12. She had about probably like 6 or 7 months when she was 11 or 12, when she would walk in her sleep every night, almost every night, in like really like speaking in weird alien tongue. And I remember waking up like, don't come in, this is really scary. But she would wake up behind the TV downstairs and then like fall back to sleep. And so we just kind of knew this would happen. And she would sometimes go into my parents' room and say, hey, Mom and Dad, I'm, talking in my sleep kind of stuff. And my parents would like go back to bed. One night she wakes up and she looks out into the hallway, and she sees her feet are kind of pointed toward her bed. And she sees a black mass in the darkness of the hallway floating toward her bedroom. And of course, my sister is a very imaginative person. And so she just kind of got a little spooked, pulled the covers over her head. Like she didn't want to see what this was happening. She's going to wait till it goes away.
I would literally have done a big wee in the bed at that point.
She almost then does, because when she pulls the covers away from her face, there's a woman about this close to her face, looking at my sister laying there. And my sister screamed bloody murder. She just was, I remember waking up and she was just completely beside herself, rushes into my parents' room.
Understandably so.
And my parents thought she was talking in her sleep again. And so they're like, oh, Carrie, go back to bed. And so my poor 12-year-old sister had to somehow figure out a way to get back into her room and go back to sleep, which I can't believe she ended up doing. But about 5, 6 years later, my mom's good friend from childhood is coming over to visit. My mom and my sister Carrie meet Celeste in our front foyer. Her name was Celeste. She was this South Side of Chicago, no filter.
It's a spiritual kind of name. It's like an angel
It is
name.
a little bit, yeah. South Side of Chicago, no filter kind of woman. She just would always just say what's on her mind without even thinking about it. And my mom says, Celeste says, so where am I going to sleep? I can bring my bags up to the room. My mom says, you'll stay up in Erin's room because she's not living here, guest room, blah, blah, blah. And Celeste goes, oh, well, I hope it's not the room where the woman in black is floating over my bed. And my sister's right there, and she hears this, and she totally freaks out, just tears everywhere. And so Celeste said that years ago when she stayed at the house, some woman in black was floating over her bed in the middle of the night when she woke up. So there was this long story, of all this woman in black in the house.
What do we think about the idea that people die in their Victorian clothes and then have to come back as a ghost wearing them? Because do you think there's now modern ghosts in kind of like, I don't know, wearing 80s outfits?
Right, yeah. I've always thought about that. Like people in like the year 1237, was anything haunted back then? And if it was, where are those ghosts, Anyway, so that's the little story. There are a lot more stories about my house, but
Sarah asks something. What advice can you give to anyone looking to craft a compelling 3 to 5 minute short script?
Oh, okay. Okay, so I think the best thing you can try to develop a slice of a bigger story, but that slice is the twist, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I was going to say it needs to be something that's completely plausible from the off almost.
As an example, one of my writers wrote this story about a mom and a daughter, and the dialogue is talking about how they have had to change their names, and the setting is obviously in the 1940s, but there's very little that is specifically said, other than the fact that they need to lie and say what their real names are.
Yeah. The
door knocks and a Nazi soldier comes to the door. And so suddenly you're like, oh, so these are Jews in Nazi Germany, etc. And then the little girl is asked by the Nazi soldier to go take a walk with him. And he is going to test her on who she is. And it's just so compelling. It's maybe a 7-page script. So I think it's all situational. And as long as you can make sure the audience understands who the characters are quickly, get that out of the way as fast as you can and just get into the situation.
I was going to say, the first thing I thought of was, because I guess in my history, I have someone in my family, so they didn't want to be buried because they were worried that they would be alive. And so there's always been this thing about being buried alive, and this idea of being in a kind of box and having that scrapey fingernail kind of dark. And I think if you could, you could set up so from that moment of us kind of our eyes opening with whoever's in the box to be with them. I feel like you can do. There's so many ways you can go with that. With your
well, so what does that do? So the audience watching understands immediately what the situation is.
Mm-hmm.
There's no explanation needed. You immediately feel for the character. You're really not too worried about who this person was. You might think, how did the person get there? But you're not trying to figure out what the character's flaw is or the problem is. You know, it's none of that stuff. It's about, oh my God, the situation. How do you then make it unique? And where is then the twist? You know?
Yeah. How did they get in here? Was it a trick gone wrong? Was it revenge? Was it?
Yeah. G.W. Welch, scary stories need lit candles. We actually have lit candles. You can't really see it. Let's see. Are they still there? We go. Little fire. They're there.
I was gonna say, or I just do this. And just
But we
turn
have
the lights
these.
up.
We have these studio. Oh, we're gonna make it spooky.
Okay.
It's gonna make it yellow, really.
Let's see if we can make it. Oh, where did I just turn out?
She doesn't know how to use the lights.
I didn't know how to. I'm not an idiot.
Yeah, so you can see our scary living room in the background. But now we need a flashlight under the chin. James McCarthy, is horror the best genre for? Oh my god! Now we can't see anything.
I think it's too dark.
This is a little bit of a.
Oh. Hello.
This isn't gonna help.
Why are you? So you need some blonde hair, then you'll be all right. And my hair is
Naturally
glowing.
dark.
And look at my top. You need a sparkly top and some blonde hair, then they'll be able to see you. So we've now.
I guess we're going to try
horror.
to do it this way. James McCarthy asks, is horror the best genre for beginning filmmakers to attempt as a way to break in? You know, I don't think there is necessarily a best genre to break in with. Is it easier to make and produce a horror script? Probably.
I think that's back to that idea of the Blair Witch project and the fact that you can do like some kind of verbatim or something that's found footage, which feels like it doesn't need to have that same sense of perfection and sound is always a thing that really shows up if it's cheap or not. It shows the quality of the production. So it feels like I think that's what I think people think that it's the way to break it.
I think they think it is because a lot of horror movies don't focus all that much on character development, or at least they think it doesn't. The issue is in today's marketplace, there have been so many horror movies that have been well done, and there are classics, like Hollywood classics. So when we think of great horror movies and we go to watch one, we hope we find that. Like, we want to see that good of a horror movie. So it's a little bit of a cop-out to go, I'll write a horror genre first because I think it'll be easier to get made. If you love horror, you know how to write it really well, and it's an amazing idea, then absolutely. Then that's probably the way to go.
I think we always kind of talk about is about whatever you're passionate about. So whatever
Right.
is really floating your boat. I mean, I could never write a horror movie because I don't watch them because I have a terribly fertile imagination and it
I'm
would
going to try them.
haunt me.
Keep talking.
It would haunt me terribly. So do I like butter? It's not butter. So I feel like it's one of those things that it would, no, it did nothing. You basically need something underneath. Have you got to turn your phone?
I'm like in the ooh, shadows over here.
And maybe it's a good thing, Max.
Oh yeah, nobody wants to see me anyway.
Just turn, that's what you need.
I just have to do this the whole time.
Where's your torch?
Whatever, don't worry about it. I think you get the gist here.
I did try and move my computer.
Hopefully
screen.
that answered James' question. It's okay.
Can't really see it.
I've created a psychological horror thriller, and I see that it allows for creative plot twists that are captivating, but delivery is somewhat of an art with this. Well, that
I agree, Michael.
totally. So here's one issue, Michael. Psychological horror thriller. For one thing, choose one or the other. Either it's a thriller or it's a horror. If it's psychological, it's probably going to be more along the lines of thriller.
I was going to say also as well for contests, if you're entering contests, it's much better to go down the thriller route than it is horror. I think there are more people looking for thrillers than there is horror.
Well, and it may be an indication. Well, we'll put it this way. If you tell a producer or a manager or an agent that you have a horror thriller, they are immediately, and I'm going to be a little harsh here just on purpose, Michael, but they're immediately going to think you don't know what you have. And that's probably not true. You probably do know what you have. I think you need to be more specific in terms of how to market the project. So if there is a Saw-like quality where there is a ton of gore and there's all this, blood and guts and there's a slasher element to it, then sure, it's probably horror. Seven is probably more horror than thriller. This Seven is a tricky little.
There's such psychological aspect to Seven, though.
Seven is really tricky because it is very psychological. So I would call that psychological horror, because even though there is an investigation involved, that's the tricky part about Seven. You do have the kind of reluctant investigation from the two. So it is a little tricky, but I would choose one or the other. What is the experience of the audience going to be? Is it going to be outright scare and gross out stuff, or is it going to be much more of a thought-provoking adventure? And then choose one or the other. But then, yeah, I mean, at the same time, now you have to piece together all of these mysteries that they have and all the clues they have to solve. You have to work backwards a little bit, but anyway, you get the point. Sarah Perkins, am I afraid of the dark? Sometimes I'm very afraid of the dark.
I think it is. That's the trouble, isn't it? I mean, that's really a very important point of writing a good horror or a psychological thriller, is that you allow people to face their own fears. So there has to be room in it. There has to be, because the reason why I feel like you're afraid, one is afraid of the dark, is because you imagine all your worst elements of it. All your worst fears come up. And you kind of need room in a script to allow people to imagine their own worst fears. It's
that, and ultimately it stems from the unknown. And what can come from the unknown is then your need to try to figure out the unknown. And that is pretty much what you see in every single horror or thriller movie. A character at least needing to figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
And they're going into the unknown to do it. What would you call the Ninth Gate or Angel Heart? So Angel Heart, I would call, God, see, there are always little nuances. Seven's a great example where you could probably argue that it is horror thriller. Generally speaking, if you're not David Fincher, choose one or the other. David Fincher can get away with that, because there's such a stylized approach. Angel Heart was extremely stylized. Somebody's crying, screaming, and laughing all at once.
I like the little angry head. I like my angry head.
The ninja head. Supernatural thriller, yeah. So I would call The Ninth Gate more of a supernatural thriller. Angel Heart's tricky. It's really hard to call Angel Heart something.
Well, I guess because it has the devil in it.
Yeah. But it's horrific.
It is horrific.
I would think it sways a little closer to thriller because it isn't straight slasher horror.
And I think that's my...
It's not based on the scares, it's based on the chase and the discovery.
I guess that's my thing about that I don't really like about horror, is the fact is that I'm not a big fan of just being scared. I like to be intrigued or to solve something or to, I want to think the best about people. So when people are just like monsters, I find that very difficult. I feel disappointing in the human race.
I mean, horror for horror's sake, it can sometimes work, but only if the idea is so unique. Like if you were the first person to write Night of the Living Dead, then it's like, yeah, let's create a whole bunch of horror, and the characters aren't quite as important. It's about what you're going to see on screen.
But does it, that's a whole question about whether you become numb to something because you see it often enough and then you don't care. And
well, so that's the thing, because horror has such a cult following that people want to see that, and that's why they're going. So they won't get sick of it. But I think audiences are wanting much more of a character-oriented horror story. And I think it's one reason why American Horror Story, the TV show, has lasted as long as it has.
Well, they also kept reinventing it, which
they're
was very
reinventing,
smart.
and they're right. But it's always the same actors, which somehow the audience is able to kind of connect themselves to that.
Not always. No,
generally speaking,
they kept reinventing every series.
No, they keep the same actors. They keep the same core actors in every season. Yeah. They do add some, like Cuba Gooding Jr. was in the recent one, and they're But anyway, what do we
have a couple of questions. Sarah Perkins, what is the first thing you do when you come up with a script idea?
That is a very big question, Sarah. Masika is saying right, which is not a bad idea. But Sarah, I would start writing down ideas about these 4 story elements. What's your concept? What's the general structure in terms of how will this play out? What will happen and when? The character development is extremely important in terms of flaw, intention. What's the character's motivation in terms of what they want versus what they actually need? I guess those are the 3. Technically, the 4th would be the page writing element, which you won't worry about yet. I wouldn't go into final draft and start writing pages. I would try some form of very light outlining, general brainstorms, just to kind of ask yourself the question, what do I have here? What's the concept?
I think there are a lot of why questions, a lot of what and why.
Yeah, why do I want to tell this story? Is there a really strong theme? Or if it is just a horror movie, then what's the really cool little twist we're going to add? Like Scream was so revolutionary because it was like they were making something really scary based on old horror tropes. So it was really fun because you kind of went in knowing what you were going to see. There was an expectation there, and they delivered on the expectations, and it was still entertaining. That was a pretty character-oriented movie, to be honest.
Yeah, you fell in love with a lot of people in Scream.
All right, so
another couple of quick questions because we are almost at an hour, even though we had a slightly weird beginning. Any thoughts, tips on maximizing a contained period thriller? The thing is, there's a big kind of like swoosh towards period thrillers at the moment, so I feel like it's the time to write one.
So, contained period thriller. I immediately think yes. Which, Rob, if you haven't watched The Witch, you should totally watch The Witch because that's a contained period thriller. You could probably call it contained period supernatural thriller. There are horror elements. It's much more thriller based. There's some gross out stuff in it, but it's not slasher gross out. It's not gore gross out. Definitely try to watch the you have.
Okay.
So tips on maximizing a contained period thriller. Character. Because if you're like, there was one movie called what is it? Wind Chill, I think. What is this movie?
Wind Flaps.
Wind Chill with Emily Blunt from 2007. These 2 characters are
typical Wind Flaps.
The whole thing takes place in a car that's broken down on the side of the road.
Well, I think that's the thing is like it's I know my friend was going to write a horror all set in one house, one room, it's this idea, isn't it, of just keeping it all very, but I guess a period thing, then it's also keeping it of its time.
I feel like the period element can play into the mystery behind whatever the thrill is.
And it means you can't get that information thing. So you can't Google anything. You don't have any mobile phones. You don't have all these other outs that are kind of make things that are modern horrors hard.
Yeah.
They have to be lost in a forest without any cell signal. Yeah.
So rules of the world is very important. Making sure that they stick to those rules and that you understand the writer, understand what those rules are. Character elements in terms of what their problems are, what they really want, what's at stake. Like if this doesn't happen, then this horrible thing will happen. The audience needs to understand that.
I guess that's a limited production value. So so basically we're just trying to talk about money, aren't we? We're just trying to say about how can you maximize something but keeping it cheap.
So yes, that is a huge element in terms of it is limited production value. Contained usually means very few locations. one location, two locations,
and a
everything's
small cast.
Yeah, small cast. It's very literally contained. But you could argue that there was that movie with Catherine Zeta-Jones and a huge cast. It was called House on Haunted Hill, I think. That technically you could argue is contained because it all takes place in one giant mansion. But the production value was crazy because it was like a supernatural horror and they had all these special effects. Production value versus production total in terms of money is different.
Yeah, I guess my thing is it's really about making us so invested in these characters that we don't mind being alone with them and making the world so true that we can, because that's the trouble with horror for me as well, is that the people leaving to go walk down a lonely road by themselves while they leave someone behind.
That's a really good point. I'm going to bring that up if we have a couple other comments here, but we're running pretty long here, everybody. But one of my writers just recently wrote a relatively contained horror movie. And it's about, well, I'm not going to say what it's about necessarily, but he purposely wrote as many horror tropes as he could in terms of, the character goes after another character who they believe is dead in the woods, knowing that there's danger out there. Every time I see that in a movie, I'm just like, come on, what are you doing? And they've already sent the police out to find, and look for this character. So my thought process is kind of logical in that don't go into the woods. On one hand, that's kind of fun because now you're engaging the audience. And this is what I was telling my writer today. This is actually David, one of our fast track fellows. And I said, all of these things are fine in terms of keeping to the tropes. But if we haven't made the characters unique, then it's just going to be like every other horror movie. And that was what we focused on then. Do we care enough about this character that's defying the police officers and saying, I'm going to go out into the woods, because it was one of the minor characters. And I said, I don't care enough about that character.
Yeah, also defying the police officer. There has to be a really good reason for that, because especially when there's death on the line. Isn't that Princess Bride?
Yes, Princess Bride. When death is on the line.
When death is on the line, we need to make sure that there's a good reason to go against death.
Right. Yeah.
Because even plants want to live, that's everything wants to live. We all really want to live. We all want to survive.
Horror and thriller both have the element of flight versus fight. Like that's why it's tricky to differentiate the two. You're going to have the scares in both. The type of scares in a thriller are going to be much more slowly coming at you and like a realization type of scare. Sometimes you have the jump out at you kind of thing, but it's not the gory scare. It's not the Saw kind of, I have to cut my own leg off kind of thing.
You have to get out.
Yeah. The Witches, Roger Eggers film a couple years ago. Just type in the Witch in Roger Eggers. But Michael Gentry.
The movie did a good job as a contained thriller that focused deeply on character to carry the story inside of an elevator for over an hour and a half. That's true. I haven't seen it, but that's a good idea about being trapped in an elevator with someone that you don't want to be trapped in an elevator with.
Another amazing one,
fan.
Rob, if you haven't watched. We're all trapped in the same country with the crazy person. Rob and Michael, everybody, if you haven't seen Alfred Hitchcock's The Rope, it's just called Rope. It was based on a stage play that I think Hitchcock wrote, or maybe he adapted it from somebody else. But it's called Rope. It has literally 4 characters in it, and it takes place in one apartment in New York. And it's about these 2 kind of white privileged guys that, because they're so privileged, they try to see what it feels like to kill somebody. So they lure somebody in the apartment and they end up killing him. Jimmy Stewart comes in, and now it's all about, oh my God, Jimmy Stewart's going to find the body in this chest. It's fascinating because so little happens. But it's so character oriented in terms of intention.
Does it have a lot of tension in it? Because that's the thing about it, isn't it? It's about keeping the tension.
Rope, and it's tension. There's so much, it's constantly tense, and the anxiety, and then you understand that Jimmy Stewart might be in danger. Yeah, Rope is brilliant. Yeah, it is. It's like I think it might have been one long take. It was shot like a stage play. thriller scares come through plot.
That's interesting, though. I mean, would you still be good to watch today? Because that's the trouble, is we've become so impatient. I feel like that's the trouble, is we're like, quiet.
All those old movies are. I was telling you about last night. One of my family's favorite scary movies is 1944, maybe 49, called The Uninvited, and it's one of the first, if not the first, movie that has some form of a special effect ghost in the movie, and it is scary. Like it's legitimately.
We were going to watch that, but we watched the cartoon instead.
We watched Legend of Sleepy Hollow, also because it was late, and But that was part of it, though, because I didn't think we had the attention span at the time to watch an old movie from the 40s, because those takes are so long. Like the directors they didn't want to spend money on the editing, so they just held the camera in front of the actors and relied on the actors to deliver the lines and keep attention.
I remember the Addams Family. That hand really freaked me out.
And Cousin It.
You can find no, Cousin It isn't the hair. Isn't Cousin It the hand? The hair, and then the hand was.
No, the hand was just some disembodied hand. Yeah.
That always freaked me out. So I guess that's it. It's whatever you were.
Yeah.
Whatever you were.
Well, we held a pretty good audience here tonight, everybody. We went over an hour for, I think, maybe the first time, but. A lot of great questions, a lot of great comments. If you guys have more for us, you can email Felicity or max@networkisa.org. We've got Michael saying again, the House of the Devil, slow pacing, build suspense. Just being alone in this huge Victorian with the babysitter who has never seen the kid asleep upstairs. Yeah, so it's also location based. What does the location do in terms of creating the suspense? Because there's a relatability in all of horrors and thrillers.
I think it's also, that's the thing about home, isn't it? Home is seen as the safe place. So when there's trouble at home.
The call's coming from inside the house,
Yeah.
Anyway, guys, I think we're running past time here, but good luck with all of your writing intentions and inspirations. We have a little fly bug flying around. Don't forget about applying to contests, hiring consultants.
Don't forget about drinking still wine.
Don't forget about drinking wine. Yeah, if you want help on a weekly basis, I can help you. My coaches can help you through the Story Farm, the craftcourse.net, craftcourse.com.
Enter contests so you can build yourself and be one of our writers to watch for 2019.
Yeah, use the networkisa.org website. It's
come to Thursdays wherever you are, so you can come and meet some other writers and some DPs and some directors and create some stuff. Let's make. Wouldn't it be fun to have like a horror contest for the ISA?
It's not a bad idea.
ISA
we have 23 people right now who probably would say, yes, I'll submit to that.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Thanks so much. Have a great holiday season. We're technically in the midst of holiday season now. Have fun, get out, mingle.
So we're going to be next week.
We will not be on next week, but we are going to be doing some live broadcasts.
No, it's the week after we're not.
Oh, you're right. Yes. Next week, November 8th, we are going to be on. November 15th, we are not.
November 15th, we're going to be. You're going to be with us as we're around town.
Right, we're going to bring you guys around
with
town
the swingers
as we go to the meetings.
Max is doing the swinging. I'm not doing any swinging.
Yeah, that's the kind of lifestyle I lead.
Yeah. We'll be here next week, and then after that, we'll be kind of interviewing our fast track fellows, so you can actually see them and have a bit of an experience of being in LA doing our thing.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much.
The best.
Happy All Saints Day.
Happy All Saints.
Post Halloween Day.
You're amazing. Go eat some candy.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye now.